Hello and welcome to the Finding North podcast. My name is Florian Leigh.
And I am Fahim Florian.
Join our Sunday conversations where we discuss breaking news of the week around big tech and share our thoughts around all things business, careers, and how to find your true north in life. This is episode 5 of our podcast today in a little bit of a different setup. As you can see, we have two of our friends on the show today. So number one, we have Leigh Gammons, CEO of Cognified, and then we have Simon Macfarlane, associate partner and industrial lead at IBM iX. Both of our guests today are former or existing colleague of ours. So all the four of us have actually at one point worked together for the same company and then stayed in touch more or less over the years. And just because I think both Leigh and Simon would be good guests to have on the show with a little bit of banter, in between us, we decided to have them on. Actually, they sort of like, they backed to be on the show first because they really wanted to go.
now you're making.
What are you guys hoping to get out of Finding North? We're hoping you find your North.
I can show some WhatsApp proof that begs to differ to your original point there.
I've already met my goal. I actually just wanted to be friend number 1, so I've already met my goal. So I can log off right now.
No, of course. Just joking. No, so thanks guys for taking the time. As you said earlier, we don't really have any script or anything. I think it's just also an opportunity for us, the four of us, to connect. As we just spoke with Fahim before we kicked off and said like, well, actually, this is the first time the four of us actually really talking in a very long time, and we probably all had sort of like promised each other to stay connected. I mean, Leigh and I, we still work together. Leigh and Simon, we meet once in a while. I connect with Fahim, but the four of us, we've not really had the chance since some of us took different paths.
So I feel like the is it the fourth wheel on this one, because I feel you guys have probably stayed more in touch, right? And you've got a bit of a WhatsApp banter going. If you've got a WhatsApp group, your relationship is on a whole different level, right?
Fahim, if you feel left out, we can add you in. Don't worry, pal.
You know what? But I want to be added to the original WhatsApp. None of this, the one with Fahim on, right?
Oh, right, okay.
plus one. Yeah,
I don't want to be the +1 group, right? No. So I think this is an interesting topic in itself. I don't know what your experience are, guys, but you go to university or school, you get to know a group of friends really well, and then you make this promise to each other that you'll forever stay in touch and whatnot, and then life just hits you, right? And then you either move on or you have a different social circle. And like my example, like I'm sure like many of us, not that it's not that it's new, but maybe during university there's usually a much bigger social network, right? So you contact, you stay in touch, you have big groups and whatnot, etc. But I would say fast forward 20 years, 15, 16, 18 years, I think there's 4 of us from university that have stayed in touch, right? And when I say in touch, we've got the special WhatsApp group, and we meet up maybe once or twice a year. And that in itself is a big achievement. And I think what's really allowed us to just stay connected is maybe throughout our lives, things have happened in close proximity. So for example, we got married maybe within a 2-year period. We had kids close to the time. So there was always something to talk about or vent about that's kept us going. And I think it's the same at work, right? I mean, whenever you're leaving a place or you're moving on, you have that evening out, right? Where you say, we're definitely going to stay in touch. Let's meet up next week, Leigh, right? Let's meet up for a coffee. We've been saying it for 3 years.
I was actually just looking at my LinkedIn and we said we were going to catch up about 6 months ago now.
It's crazy. Yeah. On our LinkedIn messages, the past 3 years, like I think we've exchanged 3 messages congratulating each other of some sort. But I feel there is a group of people where even after a very long time, when you get together, you just pick up where you came from. And I feel this group's like one of them groups where you feel like you're back there. So I don't know, what are your experiences? There's in terms of just keeping in touch and moving on. I know, Simon, you've been traveling the world and you've been lived in different places. How has it been for you?
Yeah, I mean, it's a good point. I guess if you think about university, though, it's no different. I mean, outside of it being 3 key or 4 key years of your life, where you potentially live in a different city, or you're away from home minimum, it's just a different stage in your life, right? So you remove the stigma, you remove the sort of the aura around university being this benchmark in life. You think about it as just as a shared group of common interests that you had with friends. So then if that's what university is, then if you look at the various friendship groups that evolve after university, it's really no different. If I look at my WhatsApp group list now, a lot of them are based around people I lived with in Australia when I was working in Australia, my mates that lived with in New York, football teams I played for, just general sort of friendship groups that exist. And what makes those groups is no real difference to university, I think, in my mind. I think, my university, I spent a great 4 years in Brighton. I went, did a master's down there. I still see a lot of those friends, but I don't see them because they're university friends. I've seen them, to your point, around common interests and shared goals or shared sort of points and milestones in life. And so, but I guess you also got to put the layer of, let's face it, we're men. We're socially relatively quite lazy. I think most of us are. You generally end up engaged and spending time with the people that are easiest to spend time with. So 9 out of 10 conversations in my WhatsApp are from people starting them, not me starting them. And then I'll just engage in the conversation, and I just forget about it again.
Do you know how,
easy.
I don't know about you guys, right? But, maybe it's a men thing, like you said, Simon, but do you not find in some of the WhatsApp groups, the conversations are so immature?
Yeah,
that's the best thing about it.
Especially now in the last 8 weeks, it all feels like, with your mates that you connected, you all sort of went 10 years back in terms of maturity level, right?
Exactly right. Everyone's just gone back. Yeah. Everyone's just decided that they're going to do like jokes about people's parents and stuff like that. It's just, it's brilliant. I mean, I've quite enjoyed it, to be honest. It's a bit of a good release.
Yeah, I've actually named one of the chats with my best mates from back home. So it's not even university people, but people I grew up with. We called it, and now you can make fun of it already, Quarantine TV. So how am I pronouncing that word?
It's not that you're pronouncing it wrong. It just sounds so much more exotic than whatever I'm doing. That's what I like about Quarantine.
Look, hey, Leigh and Simon, I've had to hold it back, right, for the past 5 episodes. I'm like, like when you doubt yourself, like maybe I'm saying it wrong.
Yeah. The best bit about that is I listened to your podcast, the 4th one that you did, when I was going for a run, and it's quite good because you're not seeing anybody at the moment, so it's like you're going for a run with people that you know. So I listen to podcasts, or you go listen to music, whatever. Yeah. But when it's you two talking, it's like it just felt quite different. But anyway, when you said Quarantine on that, I actually had to stop running because I was laughing so much, because obviously I know who you are. So it worked out pretty well.
Okay, I think I'm gonna delete that word from my vocabulary for the next couple of episodes. I'm just gonna call it isolation.
Can we do a little special effect counter every time he says that? Maybe here, or whatever it is, right? Ding, ding, ding. I'm glad you guys picked it up, right? Because when it's two people talking, you gotta have some sort of like level of respect, right? But
it's fine. I'll take it. I'll take it. Yeah.
So one question I had, maybe for Simon and Leigh, maybe you can jump in as well. So how you said you do have friends around a interest group, right? So you mentioned maybe when you were football, but do you not find that, I don't know if you still play football actively, but since you are not in that world anymore, maybe like football, it means that for that folks of people, the intensity of conversation is not there. And it doesn't mean that if you were to meet them again after many years, it'll pick up again, but it kind of just goes down because at that point in life, you're not doing football or a particular interest.
I mean, I guess maybe without putting football on a pedestal, football is probably different. I still play, which helps. I mean, outside of quarantine,
Work
I
with
still
me,
play.
Simon. Work
I
with me.
still competitively, but football also has, is a topic that you can have discussions about, irrespective of whether you're still engaged, right? So somebody might just say, "Did you see the match last weekend?" and it triggers a conversation. But outside of football, I think, a lot of the groups do disappear. I mean, it's probably a bad thing to say, but generally what's happened is, so I've been with my missus for 5 years now, and over the course of time, all the different groups I have that I'm part of, where various friends of mine have also got partners, effectively you've outsourced your communication to your partner. So my missus is the one that goes, "We're seeing your uni mates next weekend, or we're going to go see, I've spoken to blah, blah, blah. And we're going to go to lunch with Anne and Shane next weekend because they've just had a baby." And I was like, well, I've known Shane since Sydney. Like, I should really, Leigh's met Shane. I speak to him all the time. I don't really speak to him all the time. Now my missus speaks to Shane's missus, and they arrange things on behalf of us. So there is like a secondary channel of how I keep my relationships going with a lot of people.
Is that special, Leigh? Because like, or is that just Simon being lazy?
He's outsourced the arrangement and the diary, So.
Yeah, in fact,
and just the general social care.
Shane,
social care.
He works in our office, and me and Shane have organised going for a beer with Simon, so he's outsourced it to me as well.
I mean, this is my career in a nutshell, though. I'm very good at finding tasks. Management 101. I learned that very quickly. When I was like 22. Like
outsourcing.
Somebody was outsourcing.
Delegating.
Somebody was delegating tasks to me, and I went, "Hold on a second. This feels like the wrong side of the conversation I'm on here. How do I get on the other side of the table?" And I just tried to craft a career out of it for the last 12, 13 years.
It's working. Leigh, what about you? What's your experiences around these social circles and interest groups? Do you find it similar to Simon or our experiences? What's your view on this?
Yeah, definitely. I think quite interestingly, we've still got a fairly strong group from school who still spend quite a bit of time hanging out and doing stuff together. And there's a core group of them still up in Newcastle who still live there, but then there's some in there's a guy in Canada, there's a guy who was in Kuwait who's come back now. So people have kind of moved around a bit, and I've been out to Dubai and Canada and stuff like that. So we spent a lot of time together. But when I went to university, I kind of picked the wrong degree. So I did a chemistry degree. So it meant that I didn't really go to my lectures very often, and so I didn't really create that many friends on the course. So the people that I ended up becoming friends with were people I played football with, or people in my college at Durham. And so again, you've kind of got, similar to what Simon was saying, you've got other reasons of why you're hanging out as opposed to just because you're on the same course. And to be honest, I wasn't a very good chemist anyway, so probably for the best I didn't become friends with the chemists. So it means that now you already had common interests by the time that you leave. We still hang around a little bit. I mean, my wife's actually expecting a baby in the next month. So I think that will be a bit of a game changer, because amongst our friends, or particularly the ones from uni, there's only not really many have had a child yet. So we'll see how things, at the moment, I think we're still assuming that we'll have some semblance of normal life, but I'm pretty sure we won't. So
they'll all ditch you. First group of mates I had.
All your single friends, just say goodbyes. You're gonna have to find new. Either convince them to start having babies to keep your friends, or you'll naturally move towards the other way. Because you know what? I think I've found this with my group of friends. It's all obviously folks that your friends that may have not had the baby. Of course, they come around and visit and play with the baby, and the kids are not. But after a while, there's only so much you can talk about nappies and them keeping you awake. And so there needs to be this common interest. Yeah.
But the thing about football that Simon was saying, so I stopped playing about 2 years ago, and consequently my BMI started going up. But aside of that, there's a few guys within the football team that we still spend quite a bit of time seeing each other and talking and stuff like that. And it's people who have quite a similar background to me, quite similar. Yeah, so it's football, I think, is more of a topic as opposed to just the team itself. And actually, 3 or 4 of the 4 or 5 of us still play, and I'm probably the only one who doesn't, but we still spend a lot of time together. So I don't know, I think within the however you meet, it's the other connections that you make that make it more important.
True. So maybe speaking of spending time with friends, what we usually discuss almost every week is a bit of like a summary of where we are in this whole COVID-19 crisis and how it's changing our life and how we feel at this particular point in time. So maybe to use this as a bit of a segue, so how have you guys been sort of experienced the last, I think we're 52 days since I've been in the office the last time. So it's been 8 weeks.
Have you been working?
Yeah, I've been working, but like since I've been in the office. So like,
I just thought I'd say that while Leigh's on the call as well.
Yeah. So how have you guys, both personally and professionally, sort of like dealt with that situation? And like, if there's any sort of, do you have anything that you experienced for yourself that helped you really, go through it, both in your private life, but also maybe as like, as the leader for your teams, for your companies, etc. So maybe Leigh, we start with you.
I'm actually surprised. At the start, I thought this is going to be absolutely rubbish, but I'm actually surprised about how quick the days go. So, as well with wife being pregnant, it means we're actually in the at-risk category, so we can't really go out as much, stuff like that. Which is I guess fine. So you kind of have to settle into a rhythm fairly quickly. But I'm surprised about how quickly the days kind of go and how much work that you actually end up getting through. And then I've only been CEO Cognify for like 4 months or so. So it's a bit of a tricky time to take over, really. So trying to make sure that you get the balance of communications right to the company. So I did a company-wide broadcast, I think it was Thursday last week, and doing them every couple of weeks or so. But even then, it's really hard to gauge whether people are getting enough or they're feeling like they're just getting bombarded with information. So
did you not get the manual, Leigh, the break glass manual during this this type of situation?
If only. I'd say that so many people have messaged me.
Look, why don't we just stop a second and ask Florian, do you remember anything out the company broadcast last Thursday?
I gotta admit, I had a client call, so I actually couldn't attend.
Oh, you didn't even dial in?
That is a safe answer. That is a safe answer.
Hey, no, that's cool. It was billable work, right? It was billable work.
Yeah, I really couldn't. Exactly. But I read your email.
Priorities.
I read your email, so I know all about the potential measurements that come in place if they open the office again. So I actually, I read the emails at least, so I couldn't dial in.
See? 2-channel communication already.
Exactly, there we go.
Leigh, you just need to start a podcast and you'll get everybody in.
Broadcast daily to everyone.
Leigh, if there's anything you want to tell your workforce, this is probably a good channel as well. They might be listening in.
I've seen how many listeners you guys have got.
There's like one guy who's going to listen to this who works for you.
But I was going to say, I've been surprised how many people have messaged me saying, "Oh, this is actually a great time to take over CEO." And I think I don't really know how I feel about that. I think there's good bits because you're going to find out how people deal in a crisis, and you're going to find out kind of where some of the skeletons are and stuff like that fairly quickly. I don't think it is a good time though, still, because there's no chance to kind of get your feet under the table, even though I've worked for the company for 5 years or so. And some of the decisions that I think, obviously, in the role, one of the main things is the decisions that you're making. And some of the decisions that you're making, you just haven't got the time to really think through. So I think what somebody who's been doing a job like this for 15 years, some things that are second nature, I'm probably thinking about for 3-4 times the amount of time I'm supposed to be, because the consequences of them are so big. It can be people's jobs, it can be all sorts of things that can be consequences of it. So a lot of people have said to me, it'd be great, it's the best time to take over. But I'm still not really feeling that yet, to be quite honest. Don't
you think, even if someone has been CEO for 15-20 years, that no one really has been going through a situation like this, because this sort of like global pandemic is unprecedented. So it's not that when you have been a CEO for 15 years and you have experiences under your belt, and tactics, how you usually respond to things, you can just, utilize them right now because this is sort of new to everyone. So I don't know. I would feel like it's almost like a new situation, regardless if you've been CEO for one day or 10 years to some extent, with the impact it has on the business, right, and the global scale from it.
Perhaps, but I think the other part of it is the reassurance and the kind of the navigation through a difficult time. And if we're being completely frank, I've been quite nervous about bits and pieces that maybe somebody who's more experienced would be less nervous about. And I think it's more, I've tried to be quite honest. I mean, the company know I've never done this before as well, so everybody knows where I've come from and what I've done in the company, right? So you can't kind of pretend to have, I've done this for the last 5 years and I'm just carrying on as normal. So yeah, if you're being completely honest with yourself about some of those things, and I think it's fine to be frank and honest about the things that you don't know, because it means that you'll think properly about the decisions that you've got to make. But it doesn't mean that it's not scary at times. And sometimes when you wake up and you see that the stock market's gone down 10-12% in a day, and what your clients are thinking about it, what you're thinking about, and what your employees are thinking about it, it's still scary for everyone, right?
Just to jump,
go on.
Just two small points. I think it's takes a lot of courage. I think for leaders to show their human side during this times like this, and I think that in itself, you'll be surprised how it makes your people that you lead connect with you, right? So I think don't underestimate that. Our CEO, he has weekly connects, and he's what people are really enjoying about him when you see the chatter and things like this is that he's a human being. He's going through this just like we all are, and he doesn't have all the answers. So I think a lot of people expect leaders in your position is to have all the answers, know exactly what's happening, when people are going back. Hey, to most of these things, we have no idea, and we just have to take a day, each day as it comes. And I think the other thing, Leigh, I could totally not relate because you are the CEO, but you taking this job, say at the beginning of this year, going through this pandemic. At the end of this year, Leigh, you would have gained 5 years of CEO experience in 1 year. That is for sure. We talked about how everything is being squashed together. So I think you're going to come out of this 10 years older.
So yeah,
maybe less hair.
Say goodbye to the hair, my friend.
So I think I want to also pick up on the 5-year topic, but maybe before we do that, so Simon, you sort of you run a business within a business, right? As like the industrial lead for IBM, and it's, so how have you like sort of like experienced the last 8 weeks, and how do you respond to the situation? What's your forecast for that whole thing?
I've got to be honest, I'm enjoying it. I think, that life could be better, don't get me wrong, but, it's a lot worse for a lot of other people. I'm a relatively sort of level-headed person anyway, but, personally, I get to spend every day with the little boy in the house. So, I mean, it's chaos, but that's cool. So that kind of gives me a bit of light relief. Obviously, Nicola has to keep him occupied every day, which is more of a challenge, but I get to hang out with him every day, so that gives me a real sort of level field to just kind of go, it's just life. Work-wise, it's a strange one. When you work for an organization like IBM, it's like IBM it's effectively a bit like WPP. It's almost like a holding group with a bunch of different businesses within it, right? So I work with the digital consulting part. Within the digital consulting part, I lead activity within the industrial sector. So in terms of what COVID-19 has had in terms of an impact, oil and gas, we've all seen the barrel price go down significantly. BP, Shell, everybody has stopped spending money. Automotive, manufacturing has stopped. All right, facilities management, CBRE, JR, JLL, all those guys. Office occupancy is probably going to go down in the next 5 years as enterprise organizations reevaluate their property portfolio. Chemicals, petroleum, trying to figure out where they stand, probably less so with chemicals, more so. And then you've got like precious metals and manufacturing or sort of hard stops in a manufacturing point of view. So if you look at it, you go, oh, everybody's in trouble. Well, everybody's put a hard stop till they figure out what the answer is. And so there's a pivot towards, okay, how can a consultancy help us solve those answers? The reality of it is we've all seen the post, I think it is, what's been the quickest accelerator of digital transformation in industry, and there's like 4 options, and COVID-19 is the clearest answer. Everybody is reevaluating what they're doing, and without getting too deep into work, if you're thinking about a pivot in your business, and if you're looking about how to shift from being a certain set of organization to be more agile, more enterprise agility, looking at transformation in a broad scale, the ability to think, stop, think, and reevaluate what you're doing means that most of the conversations we're having are really interesting. It gets me really, it gets my creative juices flowing, so to speak, that I can spend time going, well, if a certain construction business needs to think again about how they do, project planning for the next 5 years, and need to reevaluate all the bids done, and they need to introduce some level of intelligence in terms of how they do future bids, and that means that there's potentially going to be a reduction in headcount, but there's going to be a far higher win rate in terms of bids. That problem statement is something that means that that's quite fun to deal with, and that's the bit that I've really enjoyed, is the ability to really sort of think about what change looks like in these various industries that I operate in. Commercially, what does that look like? Fundamentally, we're measured on win rate. Do we win these projects? We need to see what the next 9 months looks like. There is, I'm sure, like a lot of industries, certainly within the services industry and consulting, you probably have upwards of 300 COVID-19 specific offerings. So how do we help supply chain logistics? How do we look at X, Y, Z? There's that short-term view. And then there's the long-term view, which is, okay, for the next 2 to 3 years, how can we help shape what the transportation industry looks like?
Absolutely.
And that's the side of the coin that I like to spend more time on. But realistically, we're probably measured on selling the short-term stuff to start with, right? Because fundamentally, if signings go down, you need to maintain revenue. IBM, fortunately, has a relatively decent pool of cash flow, but like any business, there's pressures everywhere. Yeah. So the business pressure is on in-quarter activity. The personal interest is in 2 to 3 year long-term vision, and it's just the balance that is the challenge.
Yeah, I mean, I think
that's fun. But that's fun. I like that. I'm fortunate also that I have less pastoral management needs these days. So I've relinquished a lot of my team management activity. So it sounds very selfish, but I don't have to make sure that everybody's okay. I do with all the people I deal with, and I spend a lot of time with the same people on certain bids, etc. But that extra layer of pastoral care, which is incredibly critically important, I just don't have the time to do. So I'm quite fortunate. In my eyes, I'm very fortunate I don't have to have that level of management layer that I need to be doing.
Yeah, I mean, I find that one interesting. That I think the 4 of us have not, invented the notion of crisis offers opportunity, but it certainly, as you said, it forces some organization and clients now to actually reevaluate what they've been doing. They're sort of like forced into that process, right? Where they've maybe over the past they've sort of like they've been holding on, making hard decisions, and now they actually need to make decisions, right? Even crisis comes from the Greek word for decision, making decisions. So I think a lot of the people are now they're now forced to make the decisions that maybe they should have done a long time ago, which especially in our industry, right? In the whole digital transformation, IT information sector, I think that there's definitely a lot of changes being, I read this week this headline, welcome to 2025, 5 years of transformation crammed into 3 months or 12 months, and I think that's exactly sort of what's happening, and that can be exciting.
I think I said this, somebody said this to me the other day, it's like, it's not true for everybody, but if you look at this umbrella term transformation, which doesn't really mean anything, but we all have to deal with it on a daily basis. For a large pool of industry, it's been an ambition, right? It's how do we get to that level? Where do we get to? Now, due to the pandemic, it's become a need. And just that pivot mentally, for people to look at ambition and realize it's not actually ambition they need to get to. It's actually immediate need to think about these things and make changes or make vision statements or think about roadmaps, means that there is a bit more engagement internally within organizations to suddenly go, well, we have to tackle this now.
Yeah.
It's not, we need to think about what the future looks like. The future state is the current state, and the current, that near-term vision for a long-term future, that pressure to some extent that organizations are feeling, certainly in the sector I look at, means that they're far more ambitious. They're realistic. They need to look at cost cutting. They need to look at a huge range of sort of fiscal decisions that are going to have a significant impact both on headcount and business for the next 3 to 5 years. But actually what's going to come out on the top of that is who knows? And that who knows future point, that North Star as such, is what is why I work in this space.
Yeah.
So how do you think you're managing to think as a group during this lockdown? So what the thing that I've found is a lot of the time when you're doing calls and stuff like this and conversations, you arrive with an answer to a question. You update everybody on the call. Everyone else does their updates, and then you go away. You do more thinking in isolation. You come back, and the thing that I've really missed is the group stuff round, like say if you're around a whiteboard and you're trying to go through ideas. That's the biggest thing I think that we miss from an office is actually groups. And there's all sorts of technologies and tools, but groups thinking together and coming up with ideas and ways forward together just doesn't seem to happen as much as it did.
It certainly doesn't. It definitely doesn't, right? And if I look at my efficiency rate in terms of work, I would say that pre-COVID, 30% of what I did in hallway conversations and with quick 5-minute conversations with somebody to make 5-step gains that I can't do now when I'm in this sort of virtual world. But we've been quite lucky in a sense that certainly within the digital part of the business, like I would say probably 10 to 15% of the business has been enabled in effectively just being remote working coaches. So it's an offering that's been sold into clients. If you think about my sector, a lot of manufacturing, no engineers have ever worked at home. They've only ever worked in offices together on project lifecycle management tools and etc. So there's been quite a tactical offering around offering remote work coaches. So that's everything around the tool sets, but also managing workshops, how to look at milestones and how to document thoughts and points of view, how to facilitate workshops, etc. So these people are effectively like virtual workshop coaches, and they just act as a conduit to a group of people who may potentially work together to do things. We use those internally on some of our own activities. So they're a certain type of discipline, they're a certain type of personality. It also helps, at a very basic point, clear the bench, right? So you can reskill some people who potentially may not be as utilized as they have done in the past into being really good at managing virtual workshops and using various mural tools, etc. So there's a big emphasis on the business to use that resource as much as possible, which means that, to be honest, sometimes they get in the way, but sometimes they're quite good foil for what could be, to your point, Leigh, let me do the thinking, come back to it, report into it, and then leave it, and nobody really does the questioning. So the questioning part is where these guys are really useful. Is we could all be a team coming in and having a chat about something and going, well, I've done this bit, cool, let's tick it off and move on. These remote working coaches are kind of there to be almost play devil's advocate and question the process to get to that thought in the first place, which then stimulates a conversation. And they're very good at, their skill set means that they're very good at bringing to life those ideas onto virtual tools so that you can see a tangible output. So that's helped. But to my earlier point, I think 30% of what I used to do, I can't do anymore. I've done a sort of analysis of my effort in terms of how I create pipeline, how I do learnings, how I manage, how I have conversations with clients and internally. And probably I'm losing about 30% of efficiency that I'm not getting back in this current world.
I think...
which is a challenge, right? Which is a challenge.
Yeah. I mean, I've also been contemplating this a lot in terms of, can you really recreate the magic of a team that really knows each other, has worked well with each other, create those magic moments across the on a whiteboard? I remember in Cognified, I don't know if you guys remember, the amount of magic moments that happened around that pool table, Andrew, if you're listening, you got a lot of ROI out of that pool table that we were all playing. Most of the time, people thought we were just playing pool all day long, right? But we had the whiteboard next to the pool, and we were just spitting ideas, and a lot of the things that evolved later on came out from those informal. And when you let yourself loose, the creativity just flows. And recreating that in an online environment, I think, is very different. But I've started to really just reflect on. I've been a massive advocate in Unilever of co-located squads, so small teams, co-located, and it's been my big mantra. And of course, that's been put on its head recently. But I think ultimately, it's if the team is able to pivot very quickly, that's the ultimate currency any organization can have. But also, Leigh, to your point, when you said, can we really recreate that? I was actually thinking about, there are tools out there that make things easier, and there are facilitators, as Simon talked about, that help you get to where you are. I feel that there may be a massive upside to this, right? It may mean that the future of virtual co-location allows you to be able to pool a much larger talent pool to tackle a particular problem, if you can make it work, right? Yeah. Whereas before, with co-location, you were restricted to a physical location with people of close proximity that can get to that location and actually can spend enough time for a period of time to be able to do that. I think if we can make the whole crowdsourcing work, crowdsourced working type thing work, there is massive upside. I still feel, though, that there is that physical, emotional, human connection that you get to have when you've got pen on a whiteboard, etc. But I think we need to all start to believe in that. How do we create that in a virtual world? And it actually could be much better. That's this kind of attitude I'm starting to take. It's hard because I know that the previous methodology has worked so well for me and my teams in the past. So I think it's changing our mindset.
Yeah, I mean, it's sort of a trade-off at the end of the day, right? Like with co-locating people, you have the advantage of bringing people together in one room, right? And then, as you said, like creating those moments that we had in the past, like around a pool table, whatever else it might be. But usually that restricts you in type of the resource pool you can tap into, because you can also tap into the resource pool of the immediate city or country, maybe, right? But if you then, that restricts you in type of the access to talent that you might have. On the other hand, if you then, you have access to like global talent because you do it in a virtual world, you might have access to a much bigger set of talent and people and so on, but you might not be able to as much recreate those magical moments around like a physical space. So at the end of the day, I think it's a trade-off of which one is more important probably for your idea or the business or the setup, right? And I think both have.
Florian, is it not So, I mean, you two, I thought your desk was the pool table for my first year at Cognitive, but it's not necessarily the place or the physical interaction for me. I think it's the fact that if us four sat around a pool table or whatever, and we start to come up with some ideas, we already kind of know each other. So your inhibitions are kind of reduced, and you feel that you're able to just be yourself and put ideas out there that are not the norm, or that might get, I might say something, Fahim may rip it up, and I wouldn't be offended by that.
Yeah.
Whereas creating that initial rapport with a group of people that you don't know, that's if you can find a tool that will break down that barrier early on, because even if you don't know people, if you do a full day's workshop, the morning's often a little bit tentative, and the afternoon people are grabbing pens off each other and doing what they want. And that's just because they've got to know each other. I think
that's a really good point, and that also sort of connects to I think what Fahim said earlier around humanization of people who sometimes feel very far away and distant, right? It's like in a hierarchy sort of place, because usually you only meet people in like a work setup, right? So it's a very structured sort of thing. And now suddenly you see people in their t-shirts, in their living room, and the kids running around, right? Regardless if it's, an associate level consultant or the CEO of a company or the CFO, it's sort of like, it takes away, for me at least, I don't know how you guys feel about this, but like seeing everyone in their personal space, and also maybe a bit more stressed down, a bit more easygoing, and there's not so much, if the kids scream in the background, the kids scream in the background, and if the wife walks through the picture, the wife walks.
I think, Flo, I think you're right, but I think to Leigh's point as well, when the team trusts each other, and the four of us would not be able to have this kind of an informal chat. It feels like we're together, right? Because actually, we've built that relationship in that physical world, and we can really be really open with each other. And I think, I have this saying always, give somebody a mask and they'll reveal their true self to you, And I think us on this particular call, we're probably a little bit more extrovert. We don't mind. We're confident enough to let people in our homes or our bedrooms, or if the kids run around, we've built that resilience to a certain extent. I still find, you'll still find people on, even though the Zoom culture is now accelerating, people are still a bit shy switching on their video camera. People are still a bit worried about kids running in, etc. I think unless we can crack the human aspect of making somebody feel comfortable of who they are, that is when trust builds, and then that's where the creativity and no one's going to take offense if we somebody came up with an idea and we just like threw it in the bin, and that motivates people a lot more. So I think there is that aspect. I don't know, maybe this is a new business opportunity, right? I mean, how do you create trust in a virtual world?
I've thought about this, right? And, how do you get trust in a virtual world is like a never-ending question, right? We could go on forever about that. But let's be honest, the current climate has shown that the current set of collaboration tools, however great video conferencing is not adequate enough for the needs that we have as people who operate in a business, right? For example, the fact that speech to text based capabilities are so lacking in workshop based collaboration virtually is terrible, right? If you were just spitballing ideas and you're just trying to do workshops, somebody has to pre-record this, they have to keep a note of what's being said, etc. If you could layer this with great speech to text capabilities, even if you gamified it on top with avatars, I'm not saying this is the solution, but it removes that need of sort of personal one-to-one connection. People, I can see who you are, I can see your house, when you haven't met somebody. There's a huge opportunity around trying to add creativity to virtual collaboration that I think is significantly lacking. One, I think it's based on the technology that's lacking, but two, I think there's never been a real need, right? But if the new norm is some form of emphasis around virtual collaboration, there's going to have to be a significant uplift in the type of software capabilities that are needed to provide that, because we have to sit in, we have an hour and a half conversation. I can't tell you what was said 40 minutes ago unless you go back and rewind and watch it. If there was an ability to actually see what was written, it would start, like a version of Prezi, you could start spinning up outputs and word clouds based on the key themes, where based on the camera, for example, Fahim showed empathy for what I said, so that potentially highlighted that point. That point of discussion is important, right? There's all this capability that is available now. If Leigh was shaking his head, going that, and going, well, actually, that point may not be as important. Florian was just looking
We're all being analysed by Simon. Whenever Simon's a bit quiet, just you make sure you're aware of what you're doing.
But what I'm saying,
no, you're right.
Isn't particularly complicated. That stuff exists already, right? Like sentiment analysis via human movement existed for years now. The ability to have speech to text technology has been around. So it's just that the current collaboration tools aren't as advanced as it should be for the world that we're in now. And now this current pandemic is showing that. So I think there is a huge opportunity.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think, AI, machine learning, all that stuff is definitely will uplift the game to improve collaboration and, the things being automated for us. But I think in this virtual time, there's never been a better time to be more human, because to allow a group of strangers to feel a little bit more connected so that they can trust each other, because the machine's going to do whatever. They're going to read your reaction and how you're reacting to someone's idea. But how do you create that safe environment so that person feels that their input is valued and all that? And I think that is that human side that we all may need to over-index on. I mean, Leigh, how has it been? Of course, you knew the people that you were working with, but just imagine joining in your position, and you haven't even met anybody, and you wanted to build relationship with your workforce and your teams virtually. Would it be? I think it would be quite a handicap to start off with.
Yeah, I mean, most 90-day plans that CEOs write are first 30 days is go around and meet everyone in the business. So. Yeah. And get a sense for what they do and how they do it and things that motivate them, and to try and shake out some of the pitfalls that are probably going to be there, but also to understand where people's strengths are. Trying to do that without actually meeting somebody, bearing in mind that's how I've done most of the relationships I've had in the past. Is quite a big change. And I think a lot of people who, say if somebody came from a fairly remote working business, they'd probably be able to gauge some of those quicker, but I haven't come from that. And even within, Cognified right now, we do have, we've got nearshore offices and stuff like that. So we are probably better than a lot of companies who don't have that. So we are used to using some of those tools. And even then, I wouldn't say I'd be particularly apt at being able to spot little idiosyncrasies in people's behaviours in the first time you meet them. So it's just, I think that it would be a huge handicap, but if everyone's in the same boat, then you've kind of got to deal with it and you've got to get on with it. So I think being able to use technology to a better degree is one way, but also for kind of to change some human understanding and people's interactions, that actually, we've got to be more open to technology doing more than just the technology being there. So it's fair enough. We've got to be able to spot the signals, and we've got to be able to spot the signs that are working with. And I think this is something that we all talk about whenever we used to work together. We would always say that it's not a technology problem, it's a business problem. And everyone would forget about the business change bit. Everyone would just do the implement a new bit of software. We're literally talking about doing the same thing here. And actually, it's a people and a business change that needs to happen. That's not, probably people are talking a little bit about, but a lot of people are just trying to cram in some technology to smooth over the cracks at the moment, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
maybe the other side of the coin, you could play devil's advocate, is the human element of collaboration to come out with an output. So the workshop analogy, right? Why is that the perfect scenario? We're assuming that 4 people in a room or 7 people in a room go in with one objective of a collective agreement, and at the end of that time boxed effort, they're going to come out with something tangible that's going to stick, right? If you're going to be really sort of get under the hood of it, if we're talking about process evolution, is that process worth testing in its own space? Whether technology is a solution or not, it doesn't. Even if there was no pandemic, don't get me wrong, I love workshops, but I think we've all been in workshops where probably 6 out of 10 of them fail, and you come out.
Sounds like you like delegating workshops, though, Si.
Not at all. I like a good
30% delegation.
He's gonna delegate it to the AI assistant soon.
Cool.
I mean, I would rather have a human engagement than a technology engagement. But I also like testing what's happened in the past, and I like to question. And I struggle with the idea that everything can be solved via collaborative workshops where humans spend time looking at the empathy of a problem and coming up with a solution. Like, that process is great. Experience first led modernization is a term that's been used in the industry for the last sort of 10 to 12 years, right? Whether brands do it, whether software companies do it. Don't disagree with it one bit, but I don't think we've really tested enough whether coming out of that output via just humans collaborating in a social sense is the only way we can do things.
I think that resonates. So I think that really resonates. You're right. I think now is the time, better time than ever, to re-question like all those things that we've been doing, you know, the management 101s and things like that. The bit that fascinates me now more so is the workshop, the 7 people in a workshop that come out with the whatever they come out with. I think that's the tangible bit. The bits that's fascinating is all the bits behind, leading up, the pre-workshop, the relationships that are building up, etc. I think that's the human psyche of that, because you know what, when the team really enjoy working with each other, and it's not even, it doesn't even feel like work, it just feels like fun with a bunch of mates, you know, you get the best outputs in those things. So how to harness that in a virtual world is a big thing. But I think as humans, we're gonna adapt. You know, we're gonna make this virtual thing work even better than before, and whatnot. I don't know how, but I feel I've got confidence.
Yeah, so maybe just to add one thing to what Simon said as well is, like, I think the whole questioning of how we used to do things in the past, you know, do we need to continue doing them, exposed by this crisis, right? And this extensive virtual collaboration, right? And is a meeting or workshop always the first best solution to every question, right? Do you actually always need to have a meeting, or do you always need to have a workshop in order to solve a particular problem? Is sort of something that there's a very interesting book that I read. It's called Brave New Work, where the author sort of questions if the way we organize companies nowadays is the right thing. Because if you look at the typical organizational organigram, still looks like the one from the Industrial Revolution. So it hasn't moved on, right? Most organizations, in the way they organize themselves, have not moved on for 200-300 years, even though, you know, technology and humans and so on, everything has been moved on significantly. And a lot of companies, and he gives a couple of examples, a lot of companies that have actually pivoted towards completely new organizational structures are really seeing the benefits of it. So maybe, you know, and I think that this crisis is sort of like maybe starting to poke in some of those areas where you suddenly then discover, well, actually, just because we've always done it that way, maybe that's not the way to do it going forward, right? And that might be workshops, that might how you communicate, how you organize yourself as an organization. I think a lot of those things, it's also the notion of what we said, right? This thing just accelerate maybe things that would have happened anyway. It's just they're gonna make them happen not within 5 years, but within 6 months or 12 months.
Like, imagine a world, right? So currently we have a 5-2 split, 5-day week, 2-day weekends, right? That's primarily based on legacy. That's also based on some level of understanding of how the economic impetus is going to contain them, and GDP will continue to grow based on that focus. If there was a way in which you could do 5 days work as well in 3 days virtually, or through some other form of means, and you would have a 4-day weekend, if you set a general poll up, how many people would say agree to that or not would be an interesting question, right? Suddenly you could turn around and go, you can get paid the same as you do in your current salary. You work 3 days a week. You'll deliver what you would have done in 5 days, and you'll have a 4-day weekend at the end of it. Yes, you're going to miss some of the human element, which is important, right? And don't get me wrong, I would rather be in an office every day than be at home. But there is something to be said about these prescribed notions of how outputs are measured in terms of success, and how what the value of certain things are. You know, and I always use workshops as an example because I find them really interesting, sort of like anthropological studies, because irrespective of what you think in a workshop, there are predetermined roles of what people play in that workshop. And they're either prescribed based on their experience in workshops in the past, they're somewhat determined by potentially the role they have within that dynamic. So they're a team leader or they're a client, etc. So whatever output is coming out of it, yes, it's a controlled problem statement that you need to have a controlled answer for. but you're still de-scoping some of the potential already even before you start.
Yeah. So sort of maybe 80% of the outcome of the workshop is also already like predetermined based on all the input.
It's the necessary
and
dance,
the most
right?
the most experienced people in that workshop kind of wait to hear the tick in their head to go, oh yeah, we've got the answer. We've got to a point of proof, right? So collaboration is always important. I don't think you can do things in isolation. This isn't me trying to create some world where everybody just sits in a room on their own and we all become far better at what we do. But if we're talking about what's going on in this pandemic, we're talking about the lack of human interaction, the ability to be able to challenge people comfortably because you're not sitting in a room to be able to do it. There's some level of technology can help potentially. I don't know what the answer is, but there's also something that we need to say, which is we should be really self-examining the workflow we are going through currently in all our behaviors to determine whether what we're delivering is to our true potential. Because I don't think
again, Simon Macfarlane is campaigning to do less work. Shock. So we're seeing a very recurrent
it's not less
theme here,
work, Leigh. It's you get
it's not
paid
less
the
work.
same, right? You get paid the same amount as.
And your output is just as good, if not better.
Yeah, definitely. So
more links in the description below, right?
So maybe just to touch up one last topic, because we said we need to sort of time box this, because I know that maybe the four of us we would go on talking 2-3 hours, and I think as much as some people might enjoy this, we need to probably come to an end at one point. So, but the one thing that I'd like to touch on, and I think it's a good segue from the previous topic, is how do you think the three of you are obviously very accomplished in terms of like where you've gotten in your career, and what I would be interested in, how do you think this potentially future world of more virtual work, right, will change the way you're going to make your career? Because I think all three of you would be a testament that building personal relationships in order to help you make a career, right, actual physical relationships with people, is sort of a key ingredient in moving up and making a career and becoming successful. It's right. It's knowing the right people, having the right sponsors, the right mentors, etc., which usually happens in a physical environment. So if more of the work is now going to move into a virtual world and more like this sort of setup that we're doing right here, right? Even in a business, how do you see like people maybe coming out of university in the future and so on, and right, not having those relationships yet? What do you think the impact might be on career building, career making in the future?
Wow, that's
a heavy one.
To end with.
I'll have a go first then. I don't really know how to tackle that, to be honest, but I think if I look back on some of the advice that I think I was given, or some of the pointers that I had, I think the first like 5 years of your career, a lot of the time is head down, learn how to consult, learn how to survive, and really learning how to adapt as much as possible. And then actually, I think Cognify was a big part of it. There was a boss I had who you all know, and he said, I want you to mess some stuff up as soon as possible. I want you to screw some stuff up. Use much more colourful language if it's the person that I'm talking about. And he said, the reason being is I want you to, you'll learn quickly from mistakes, and I want to give you kind of the reassurance and the fallback for when things go wrong. Don't worry, I'm here to kind of catch things. And what it meant was that you had a lot less trepidation and fear about trying new things and kind of going outside your comfort zone, and it also kind of taught you, I think, to understand your kind of pitfalls or your shortcomings quite quickly as well. But kind of before that, I think it was always trying to cover them up and trying to learn how to do new things, whereas this was like, right, okay, you're not very good at X, so either figure out a way to get somebody else to do it, or figure out a way that it's not part of your plan. So I think figuring out a way to use technology to be able to provide people with the reassurance to make mistakes whilst kind of helping their learning, and also to become as self-aware as possible. I think they're the things that you've got to use technology for, and you've got to use this remote working scenario to do, and I don't really have the answer for it. I just think that whereas usually a personal connection is something that I would probably say that I've been quite good at over the years of face to face and getting to know people off that basis. You've got to figure out a way to be able to do it whilst not meeting people in person, but give them the reassurance that they can make mistakes and to kind of discover a bit more about themselves. Because, as I say, I think one of the best things I learned was to actually spot weaknesses, spot strengths, and be able to work with them, whilst having the notion and the comfort that if you do overstretch yourself or go too far, you'll be able to recover from it.
Yeah.
So that's what I'll try. I'd be still trying to do. So it's similar principles, but applied in a different way. And I'll be honest, I don't really have the answer to it. But I've gone first, so I guess everybody else has got a better answer.
Simon, any thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I guess, I wouldn't say the three of us would agree that we've had whatever the careers you said we had. I think we're all still learning, and we're still nowhere near where we probably want to be. So I wouldn't box us into this top right-hand corner. If you think about personal relationships, the reality is you have a connection with somebody if you build some level of trust and understanding, and that's only ever going to come from honesty, right? It's quite hard to bullshit a strong relationship with somebody. Excuse the French. I think you can play the game and you can play different dynamics, and people may see you as that person, and you can, for want of a better word, exploit that personality perception for your own good. But the reality is it's about being open and honest. So if you think about this generation that's potentially coming up now, that's starting their career in this virtual world, and whatever happens in the future state, I think the biggest thing is the ability to have the confidence to continue to be yourself, irrespective of whether you're in the room with somebody. And like, I would make a guess that if all four of us were in a client meeting tomorrow with somebody you'd never met, in terms of how you would talk to that client, yes, it would be different. But in terms of how you are with them, the shift change in terms of where we are today to where we are tomorrow in that conversation is probably 10% different, 15% different max, not a huge amount of difference. So you're still being honest to who you are as an individual, and you're going to end up mirroring some of what that client personality is. If they're very straight and to the point, you're going to be straight and to the point. If they're a bit more open and asking you lots of open-ended questions and wanting to have a conversation a bit more broader than the subject you're discussing them, you will do that. But you're still being honest to the situation. I think anybody sort of coming out of university now, the one thing that they will have to learn quickly is confidence to be true to who they still are. Because people, personality types won't change. Right? There is always going to be some people who will not enjoy one-to-one conversation. We all work with them, but their outputs are incredible, right? They're just better working on their own and getting stuff done. So those people will continue to be able to do what they want to do. It's just the environment and the honesty around them being, this is where I want to be. That's the type of role I want to excel in. And if they're honest and open about that, they'll be provided with the infrastructure and the support to be able to do that. So I think it's just about being true to yourself. And I don't think it's any more than that. And I think it's actually harder to lie about who you are when you're on camera in 4 boxes or 7 boxes, because you can't hide.
Definitely.
Right.
Cool. So Fahim, last word.
No, you're gonna do the word as well, Flo. You've put us in this unnecessary category. Right. Exactly. You're gonna take all this wisdom and then finish us off nicely, right? But I think I sort of on similar lines to Simon. I think you know what, being very comfortable in your own skin. You know, I remember being given advice many years ago to say, look, Fahim, you are who you are, right? You're 5'4", you've got this background, you know, you've got black hair, whatever it is, right? Until you're not comfortable with yourself, no one's going to accept you. And that light bulb moment went on for me, and I felt like the whole world opened up, you know. And I think that in itself, there's an element of confidence that was that I gained through that, and then you constantly keep pushing the barriers and just climbing the next mountain. So I think how you teach that is actually, you know, to Leigh's point, we can all point to influential mentors in our careers and our lives that have helped us get to where we are. So recreating that in this new world, I think I think it can be done. Maybe it's going to be something different, because you could argue you can be more ruthless, more confident behind a keyboard, right, than you are in real person. So there's that weird dynamic that could be harnessed. And I think the other thing that I read yesterday from somebody that I know, and it just hit me so hard. We talk a lot about privilege, right? And we're all very privileged to be where we are, the upbringing that we've had, the education that we've had, the homes that we've lived in, etc. Yes, life is a struggle, but considering, it could be a lot worse. But one type of privilege that I think is underrated is passing on the growth mindset to somebody, So you don't get, you don't teach it, you don't learn that. You kind of stumble upon it in your life around wanting the better version of yourself. But imagine at a very young age, you pass on to people the privilege of having a growth mindset, and that in itself will nurture and nurture that individual to an exponential level. So I don't know, I'm still wrestling with that type of privilege, something that's very intangible, but I think we've all benefited from it somehow. We wouldn't be where we are without keep pushing ourselves. But imagine instilling that and passing that privilege on of that mindset to somebody at a very young age could be a very powerful thing. But Flo, you want to sum that up?
Yeah, I mean, I think, it's easy to say now because I go last, but I think to some extent you've already, all of you said sort of the same thing, but in a slightly different way. It's all about it's about self-awareness. It's about self-confidence. It's also about the confidence to do mistakes and then learn from it, right? I think you all sort of touched upon this in a slightly different way. Are we now going to solve how career making is going to look like over the next 50 years when the world is going to move even more into a remote virtual working environment? No, probably not. But I think at the end of the day, I think this is the one key takeaway, that it's not going to change regardless if you make a career in a physical office or in a remote working space, unless you self-aware of who you are, what your strengths are, what your weaknesses are, and you're happy to live up to both, your strengths and your weaknesses. It doesn't really matter if you work in a physical virtual world, that you're going to continue to struggle. And then I think the second part is, I think all of us, as you said, we can identify people in our career who had that impact. It's finding that one or two people who don't necessarily need to be, in your company. They can also be friends. They can be your father. They can be anyone, right? Your mother, someone you met in the past. It's just these one or two people who keep you level-headed and who you can.
Let me stop you there, Florian. You're welcome.
Okay.
Anytime.
Yeah, Simon, my life mentor.
If you want a guy who wants to reduce your day by 30%, I know just the person to help you.
Exactly.
Right.
All right, cool.
Reduction, 100% output.
Hey, look, guys, I think we've been going on for about a good an hour and 25 minutes or so. I think we can go on, but I've really enjoyed this conversation. It's been a while since we've connected, and back to the original conversation, we said that there's only a few. There are special groups of friends and people that although you haven't connected in a very long time, give them 5 minutes and they pick up where they've left off. So I certainly feel that way, and really appreciate you guys taking the time out to have this Sunday conversation with us.
Thank you, guys.
It's been great.
Sure.
Thank you very much.
All right, Flo, how do you wanna?
I'll do the readout on the recorded version this time. I think it's easier, so we're not gonna take up too much time. Yeah. So thanks, guys, and see you next week.
See you soon. Stay safe.
Yes.
Bye.
Ciao, ciao.
Thanks for listening, everyone. If you enjoyed this episode and you're listening on YouTube, please let us know in the comments below, like the video, and don't forget to subscribe. If you're on Spotify, Apple Music, or Sounder, please leave us a review. download the episode, and share the podcast with your colleagues, friends, and family. If you have any questions you would like us to cover in the next episode, if you want to be on the show, or for anything else, please email us at findingnorthpodcast@gmail.com. That's findingnorthpodcast@gmail.com. Thank you. Have a great week all. Stay healthy, and until next time. Cheers.